Welcome back to Hustle and Heart, the podcast for visionaries who believe cities, brands, and communities should feel like home. Today's guest is someone who doesn't just build brands, she builds belief. Liz Seelye is the founder of StarryEyed Strategy, a brand strategist, innovation leader, and creative powerhouse who's helped shape some of the most beloved names in food, retail, and lifestyle. Think Starbucks, Panera, Cinnabon, and more. She's the person you call when your brand needs to remember what it really stands for, and how to stand out with soul. From corporate boardrooms to independent brands, Liz brings clarity, courage, and a little magic to everything she touches. She helps teams rediscover their North Star so they can show up boldly across products, partnerships, places, and promotions. She's also a global traveler, mom of 5, and a believer that the best ideas are rooted in curiosity, intention, and a whole lot of heart. Let's dive in. Liz, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's so nice to be with you. Thank you for
Absolutely.
this very, very sweet intro.
Of course, my pleasure. It's super fun to have people brag about you because you just never know how it's going to turn out. And I love how oftentimes people are so joyfully surprised.
You do a wonderful job.
Thank you. So, Liz, your journey spans global brands, bold innovation. What inspired you to step out and open this company?
I, for a long time, worked on a lot of big brands, which I loved. We had a wonderful time, as you said, Starbucks and Cinnabon and Dole. What I realized, though, is that I myself had an entrepreneurial streak. I think that comes from creativity, you and me. And what was on my heart later on, especially after having littles, was helping up and coming brands as well. So that's what I struck out to do. And I think the way it all happened was I was chatting with a friend. We were setting up a project from big brand to big brand and coming up with creative ideas for some movie launch with a restaurant brand or something. And she called me on the side and said, I see what you're doing. I've launched a kids drink company with my friend and former Dole client. And she said, I want to do that. And I was like, what am I doing only working on these big brands when I should be helping the up and coming companies? And I think as moms, we have a passion for those mompreneurs, especially. So that's what sort of sparked that idea. So about 3.5 years ago, I started Starry Eyed with that in mind so that we could help some of the big brands still. So we still work with Chick-fil-A and Cava and Hard Rock, but we also can create the perfect teams to also help independents, a lot of our independent restaurants we've worked with, nonprofits, and also founders. So we do Founder Fridays where we'll help founders just for fun on Fridays come up with ideas and think about how they would move their businesses forward. So it's been a really nice balance.
Well, I might have a couple of recommendations for you on Founder Fridays because there's a lot of crossover in the work that we do. And there's a lot of amazing chefs and entrepreneurs that are ready to launch some brands, but they're great at the food, but maybe not in like packaging themselves and telling the story and the origin and where it came from. One of the fun things that I've done, and love if you were lived local, that I could get you to come to, is we did a Friendsgiving last year. So I've got a group of women, about 400 of us in Women in Restaurants. And last year was our first Friendsgiving. I said 20 people need to come cook. Expect to prepare, a bite for 50 people. And you have to tell the story of your dish. Where did it come from? Like, how did you learn to make it? Who taught you? What does it mean to you? Why are you choosing this dish to share with us? And then we had 30 people pay to come and be part of that experience. And it was just so beautiful to see the connection. And a lot of folks were not necessarily comfortable at standing up and telling their
Sure.
story, but it was, you knew that it came from the heart and that it was something that was very intentional for them and they wanted to share it. And so it's just really nice to be able to create that environment for them.
That is amazing. And what an emotional experience to not only connect you with your food, but also each other. I think that's brilliant. Well, and
Yes.
to your point, a lot of chefs are really good about the food, and it might just take that third party to help pinpoint the pieces and pull it together. I mean, it's all there. They already have it. They already know the answer. Sometimes it just takes someone to help organize it a little bit.
I think also too, like having someone outside of yourself, because oftentimes you're so like in your head and trying to think about, okay, well, what about this and what about this? And sometimes it's just too much. You need just someone like an expert in another field to say, what about this? And then all of a sudden, all these sparks, starry eyed, right? You all of a sudden, like these neurons connect and you go, oh, yes, that's it. You nailed it. And you just needed someone else to chime in.
Exactly. Exactly. Just figure out what that one thing might be is that makes it better and different and really something stand out.
So with that, reimagining giants like Starbucks and Cinnabon, what's the common thread that you see kind of woven through them And then how do you create those sparks that keep them continuing on their path forward?
I think it depends a bit on the brand. I think a lot of what those best, biggest, most beloved brands have is a real focus on the consumer. So when I was growing up in the industry, we all read a book called Customer Mania. And at Yum Brands, one of the biggest restaurant companies in the world, it was all about the consumer. So we try to keep the consumer at the heart of all that we do and thinking about not just what your brand sells to that person, but also what it stands for, how you connect with them on a deeper level. So what are the shared values that you have? And I think that's something that we're starting to see in some of these even up and coming brands. The best ones are like La La Land. It's a coffee company out of Texas, if you've seen it. But the ones who were not just serving products, but serving people and making sure that they have a real place in people's hearts and minds. So that's another thing that I'm starting to see a lot of is what are the ways that you're giving back? What are the causes? One of the studies that was done around marketing knowledge was they found that only a quarter of marketers knew the values that their consumers shared. So they were really focused on the demographics like age, income, location, where they are, but they weren't taking it to the next level of
I have this book to share with you. It's called The Death of
depth of
Demographics
demographics.
because what it talks about is value graphics, right? Because yes, demographics are like how much money do you make and where do you live and how do you spend your dollars? And then psychographics is you and I might both make $50,000, but you have 5 kids and I have two. And so how we spend our dollars is also different,
Right.
even though we might both like to travel and all of that. This kind of takes it the next step forward on like the value. So sorry to interrupt. I
Brilliant.
couldn't help myself, but
Yeah,
had to
that's
share this book.
it's a perfect example. But yeah, what are the psychographics? Yeah, how do we spend our money? Why do we spend it that way? What do we care about? Our attitudes, our behaviors, so the nuances. And I think that's something that I've seen throughout my career. The brands that perform best are the ones that really care to figure out what their consumer is up to. Shown time and time again, Chick-fil-A does a great job, which is why we're doing real world research in Chick-fil-A stores. It's why Starbucks is going back to the core and making their third place cafes comfy again. So the focus on the consumer is what they all have in common. And that's a lot of times why they'll seek out someone like Starry Eyed to help them understand who that customer is and why.
I think sometimes it's you get away from that. I've got a couple brands that I work with that I help run their real estate strategy for, and it is fascinating to see sometimes when private equity comes in, it's not necessarily the best, partnership because they're trying to squeeze. And I think sometimes they squeeze things that they don't realize how squeezing that is going to then trickle down and affect the morale or I feel like it starts with the operator. And so when I scout on a restaurant, I secret shop them. I go talk to their servers and their bartenders. How do you like working here? Is this a normal Tuesday night?
I
Is
love
Friday
that.
night really busy or Saturday night busy? And they go, "Oh my gosh, I love, the owners. They're just great people. Love working with them." And so for me, that's a huge accolade where of course I'm going to then reach out to the restaurant owner and say, "Hey, you've got an amazing restaurant. I've been in here multiple times. I've had phenomenal experiences time in and time out, and I would love to see you and be part of your team that helps you grow." Whereas ones who give me the feedback that, they're kind of grumpy or they talk poorly about their ownership, I just very politely walk away. So
Yeah.
I do think that there's a lot that you can feel from the people who are working in those spaces about how they're being treated, because then that is the domino effect for how they're treating their customers.
So true. Well, and to your point, I've seen the good and the bad. I've seen private equity that really cares about that to define a brand and figure out who it serves best. Rourke was a favorite client of ours who was Focus Brands, now Go To Foods. And they, with the Cinnabon, it was help us to understand who it is, how the brand can expand, what are the different places it should show up. So they really cared. And they did the same thing for renovating their whole portfolio with a focus on the guest. I've seen the other side too. And then I love what you said about talking with the employees. And that's a key piece to any positioning project is to talk to the guest and the consumer, but also those team members on the front lines. They know it all. And I'd say too, either founders or franchisees, the people who hold all the secrets, the good treasure trove of stories to figure out how the brand started and why. Those are all just critical touch points to inform your strategy, as you know.
I agree. I want to hear a little bit more about how Starry Eyed, the name, came to be. Did you have like an epiphany moment? Was it kid inspired? How'd that come together?
Thank you for asking. No one's asked me that. I think I was riding my bike at the time.
That's when
riding
the
my
best
bike.
ideas come, right?
Have
Walking,
my biking.
exercising. Yeah.
So I think it came to be that way. It was inspired by the idea of being visionary and sort of a little bit more imaginative. At the same time, we pride ourselves on being starry eyed, envisioning the future and what can be, but also having the wherewithal to know which ideas will actually work in the real world. So the whole team has been on the client side. We either inspired change from the inside of companies, or maybe we also run a company on the side, depending. So we like to say that we'll help you dream up these big ideas, but also make sure they're really grounded in the real world so they can move your brand and business forward fast. And a lot of times, I think in the brand strategy and innovation world, there are teams that say, there's no bad idea. And I've been in some of the ideations, no buts, no bombs, anything goes. I'm like, I don't believe in that. There are a lot of bad ideas and we don't want them. We only want the good ideas that are going to work. So in the end, the starry eyed way of thinking is to think big, but keep your head in the clouds, your feet on the ground, and come up with some ideas that can make your guest and consumer starry eyed as well.
I love that. Well, and then it ties into your North Star. So I love kind of that continuity of, things that bring you joy and cause you to be inspired.
Yes, exactly. And we have a North Star framework that has some of those critical components of things like what is your brand purpose? Is that higher order benefit? What's the personality that guides it? And then what are those touch points? Then how do you keep that brand promise through all that you do? So, like you said, the products, or if it's a restaurant company, it's a menu, or your people, that wait staff, or your servers, your team members, through the place and what it looks like, not only in person, but also online, and then some of the promotions. And we've seen how, you can get crazy with deals and discounts, especially depending on the industry or category. But what we want to do is come up with really big newsworthy ideas. So promotions that are things like partnerships or co-branded collaborations, or telling stories about the products that you already have, so that those can be some newsworthy PR components to inform not just your innovation pipeline, but also your marketing plans.
I'm sure that just, hearing all these entrepreneurs' journeys and their stories, that there's got to be some like wild and crazy ideas that surprised you. Any
Yeah.
of those that you could share?
There have been a number, from fun products to help kids when they're not feeling well, to I think a lot of the up and coming ethnic foods are super exciting. So we've done a number of product projects with local independent restaurateurs. So talking about Ethiopian food or Kenyan barbecue that's so good, and just figuring out their place in the world and how in this country, maybe it's sort of a relaunch. You're taking something from another place in the world where the people here may or may not know about it, but just aligning that with the frame of reference that people here could be familiar with, so they have an opportunity to discover that. That has been really fun.
You're speaking my language. One of our favorite places down the street is Buford Highway, and it is like our international corridor. So you've got Cambodian, you have Senegalese, you've got, it seems to be mostly Asian and Latino. And then there's like another pocket of Atlanta that's a little bit more like the African diaspora mixed with like Caribbean. And so you just need to know where to go. And I love going on those adventures. It's funny, we took our neighbors over to a Mediterranean restaurant and they said, "Yeah, I don't think we would ever normally come over here."
Yeah.
And they call them Buckhead Bougie because, they want to know that the aesthetics of this space are like, high design and all of this. And
Right.
my husband and I are like, "Is the health record okay? Okay, the health record's good. Like, we're going to go eat there. We don't care if they have like carpet or tile or whatnot. Like, the food is authentic. It's really good because when folks are moving into the area, the thing that's closest to home for them is their food, where they came from. And so for them to share that with you, priceless."
I love that. That's such a
Yeah.
beautiful description and so funny. I think there was a New York Times article recently, the same time the death of casual dining happened, where the last place that all socioeconomic statuses can come together, but then Chili's is killing it. Around the same time they had, but is it good? And how half, if not more, of the experience in restaurants is just the aesthetic and how it looks. But you're right.
Correct. Well, it's the whole package, right? I'm sure you come
Exactly.
across this often too, right? Like you want that continuity of that brand. And so, a lot of folks that are entrepreneurs, right? They're going to come in, they're going to get high quality food, they're going to serve you, it can be great customer service. Maybe not the best in terms of translation, which
Yeah.
I crack up about, right? You go into the Chinese restaurant, they've got the pictures and maybe it didn't translate correctly. But to me, that's so authentic and genuine that
Yeah.
it's so real. It makes it that much more enjoyable. But I do think that there's been an evolution, I think, of groups that are receptive to taking that brand and bringing it forward. Like one of our clients is called Hawker's Asian Street Food, and they said,
I've
"Hey,
seen that.
we've been making, food for our families forever." And they would do battles on the weekend, like who can make the best bao, who can make the best roti, who can make the best pad thai. And all four of these founders went in different directions. One went
It's so
into his family's restaurant, one went into finance, one went into marketing, one into real estate.
huh,
And the one that into real estate came along and he said, "Hey, I found this second generation restaurant space. Those battles that we do on the weekend? Like, why don't we open this restaurant and do Asian street food tapas style? Because it will be less scary for people to spend, $10, $15 on a single dish. If we
right.
did it tapas style, then everybody gets a bite. They feel a little bit more adventurous that they're
Mm,
doing it with the friends. And I'm their biggest fan. And now we're, up in Bethesda, Maryland. We're out in Texas. So I think they've done a good job of bringing it to a more youthful, globally curious cuisine market and just presenting it in a different fashion than the traditional, like Chinese restaurant or Vietnamese restaurant.
totally. I think that's why we're
Yeah.
seeing such a rise in food halls now too. So you can just try everything. That's so fun. Good for them.
Thank you. So you talk about aligning products, people, packaging, places. How do you approach that holistically when you're working with emerging brands who are still trying to figure themselves out?
Yeah, I think that's the best time to do it when you can co-create the offering and the positioning at the same time, because then you can really get that product market fit and figure out. I will say that doesn't always happen. As you know, sometimes you're far down the line and sometimes you can update the positioning through the product. One of my favorite stories is how Qdoba did that when it was the one time that Qdoba pulled ahead of Chipotle when we collaborated with them to figure out what they could talk about from a product standpoint. We found the one thing that they had that Chipotle probably still can't do that well is queso. And so we said, what can we do with queso? Not impacting ops. We, I think, two new SKUs that you would mix with the base queso and created queso Diablo and queso verde and then them face off against each other. So you had to come in and taste both to see which one was the best and vote for your fave. And the fave became a part of the permanent menu, which caused a whole queso cage match flurry of promotions like queso for a kiss, queso of the month. It probably went too far with queso, but that's one example where, in that case, we said, let's not just chase Chipotle and talk about authenticity or what's real. Let's talk about the flavor. Lean into the flavor and a little bit of the indulgence and a little bit more fun so that we can do something that no one in that space could do in the fast casual realm. So that's one thing that we sort of think through is if you're pondering who the brand is, things about purpose and personality, what then would that dictate from a product standpoint? And sometimes it's easier with certain brands, like your example, for instance, you kind of know the origin story of it. Another example, we worked with a brand out of Nashville called Poncho and Lefties, and they have a sister brand, Edley's Barbecue. And they wanted to, I know it's so good.
So
They
good.
do all their in house smoked meats. They had intended to do another Edley's, but the space was too small. So we're like, well, we'll figure out how to put this into tacos instead. But Poncho and Lefties didn't really have a culinary point of view with the menu style. And so with that, inspired by not only the outlaw country song, the Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson, Pancho and Lefty story, where two unlikely amigos were kind of chasing each other around. We said, why don't we take the best of both worlds of modern Mexico and Southern soul food that started in Nashville with your barbecue and have the barbecue meats in the tacos. And so we developed that personality of like, what is this, flavor outlaw, for instance, or, what would this dictate? What would this look like if we were the only ones in the space to do it? Because Tex-Mex is huge. Mexican food actually took over as the number one cuisine from Italian, didn't it?
Yeah.
But so it's very popular, but it's also a little bit saturated. So we said, how do we carve out something that's really ownable, especially without ties to, parts of Mexico itself? So we came up with Nash-Mex, the first Mexican fusion cuisine in 150 years since Tex-Mex. And now they have, po' boy tacos and hot chicken, Nashville hot chicken tacos and moonshine margaritas. So all these signature products that you wouldn't find anywhere else. In addition to your menu antes, you have to have chicken taco and the basics. Some of those signature standouts are a lot easier to create when you have the brand foundation.
And my brain is still stuck on you saying the queso cage match because that's such a like tongue twister for me that it stuck. That was awesome. Yeah. No, it's fun to be able to, just be a kid and think through like what would be interesting? How do we tell this story? How do we get people's attention? And it's genius, right? Because you had this space that you really wanted to do something in. You already had this brand behind you. How do you add to it and grow maybe perhaps in a different way?
Exactly. And a lot of times when it is, all of these categories are so crowded, you have to map out the competition and who's doing what in order to say, how do we align our brand's equities, what we're really good at that nobody else can do? But simply as we can put it, it's how are you better? How are you different? And how do you stand out? So what is a space that we can own that no one else can?
I love that. I think a lot of people get confused because they think a brand is a logo and a color. How do you help folks like explore the personality a little bit more to get down to like, the center of the apple and truly understand the depth behind it?
Wonderful question. Yeah, I think that I also think a lot of times when you're talking about brand, you will either just get colors in a brand book or people will jump ahead to a brand campaign. And it's difficult to come up with a brand campaign or creative if you don't know what the brand's about or where it's positioned in the market or who we're up against or what the frame of reference is. So a lot of times it's just asking those questions. Who is the target? Like, everybody. And if the personality might not resonate, we talk about what is the style and tone of voice. So in your communications, how do you know that it's not just another brand? How do you really stand out so that people can recognize you? So we're doing actually a lot of sessions lately. We call them Spark sessions, where in those sessions will be like a half day workshop. We just did this with another beloved Southern style brand that I'll tell you about later.
Great.
But they said, yeah, we only have a brand book and we started to do the personality, years ago, but never came back to it. And they're at a point where just like we talked about, they don't have that menu style and those signature products that can guide some of their marketing efforts. We got the whole cross-functional team together and we can envision in this instance, because it's Southern inspired, we look to cross-category inspiration. So not just like Chef Dina or whoever it may be that's more South, but if we were talking about sort of this elevated Southern space, how were we inspired by Draper James and Reese Witherspoon's brand and bring that into the restaurant realm? So we can look outside the category to some of that cross category inspiration to see what might we include or how might we think of things differently. So again, it's sort of limiting. Once you find that, we're not really sure which direction to take this brand, I think that's an opportunity to ask some of those key questions so that people can think about it a little bit differently and just give them that ammunition so that you can build the brand foundation to connect with the customer through all those channels. So it was really, really helpful. And that was just last week, but when it's ready, I'll tell you.
Can't wait. What a tease. I do think it's important, and I really appreciate seeing kind of the evolution of even brand logos because I
Oh
think
yeah.
people get so dead set and so emotional, and they realize that, you look at Apple and you look at Nike and you look at Coca-Cola, like those brands have evolved over time and changing their logo. And, sometimes, like you say, you move forward with a logo change that everybody loves, or maybe 2 years later, then they change it again because maybe they didn't really love it. So I think just encouraging people to embrace change and realize that nothing is permanent. You can always change it down the road. So I think it's good to help people remember that.
I love it. I also think it's important to remind teams that brands are living, breathing entities. They're supposed to change and grow just like we do. We have an overview of what your North Star is. It's not a campaign, it's not a tagline, it's not something you do for a short time. It's more of that internal rallying cry. It's more a strategy for how you run your business, which includes the brand. So it's all functions all the time, the culture that we're creating, which I think puts it into the right context for a lot of people.
Absolutely. So working with wellness, food, retail, lifestyle, what are you seeing kind of at the intersection of all those industries? I feel like, wellness is really hot, people are eating better. And so I'm very curious to hear your take on how those all intersect.
I think that what I've seen, especially lately, and this might be inspired by Kava and some of the others, but that human touch. There are a lot of articles about, and my littles don't have smartphones yet, but the fact that this next generation's opting for the flip phone and trying to get away
Yes,
from some of the always on cultural component. I think
for
that's
sure.
one of the reasons we saw the Kava's outperforming in the industry is because they have that human connection. They talk a lot about bringing heart, health, and humanity to food. And having done real world research in those restaurants, people just love it. Like they love interacting, they love getting personal recommendations. It's such a difference from the fast food fuel going straight through the drive-through, which is reflected in the sales. That's why
Yeah.
QSR is down, and then places like Chili's even are stealing share from QSR. So I think that's a big piece is technology is amazing, but it should help create and strengthen the human connection, help us automate some of the back of house so that we can put more emphasis on the front of house. And I think that's what we're starting to see in health as well. We worked on Sleep Number and different things. It's how is the technology helping me to connect with either others or myself?
No, I so appreciate that. There was a coffee brand that was looking to come to Atlanta from New York, and they said, "Okay, well, we want a roastery, but then we want a drive-through right next to it." And I said, "I'm not sure that you understand. The people who sit in a roastery want to smell those beans roasting and being ground up, and they want the mug, and they want to hang out for a little while. And the folks, did you just grab it?
Sorry, no.
It's okay. And the folks that are coming through the drive-through are like, they're addicted. They got someplace to go. They're in a rush. They need to get going. And so I can't concept the two of them next to each other because they're speaking to completely different audiences. And so I encourage them to consider doing like one roastery and then doing like a hub and spoke model where we did, pickup windows or drive-throughs around it
Yes,
so you were still able to carry that story in the drive-throughs, but, I think we were ahead of the curve. I wanted to do it like just a modular unit or a shipping container, kind of like 7 Brew, but you
sure.
had the identity of the roastery that started to inform and tell the story to the folks that truly loved and appreciated coffee, to the ones that just needed to grab it and go on with their day.
Totally. And that could
Yes,
be different people or it could be the same. One of the outputs or advantages I think post COVID for everybody was the fact that you could finally get what you couldn't before really easily. But
so
then it
true.
kind of went back to it reverted to before. So I think it depends on the consumer, right? And the occasion. That could be the same consumer who depending on the occasion wants to grab and go or not. But I also think that's why Starbucks Reserve made theirs, which are only in
Yes,
their flagship locations, right?
right.
Downtown Seattle, downtown Chicago, where maybe you want the magic of the beans all around you, or yeah, the functional outposts. I like how you're thinking about it. Just depends.
Yeah. It's nice to have different options for different people, but still have the brand speak to all those folks.
Exactly. And I think that's what we're seeing, especially in restaurants too, whether it's on premise, off premise, catering, all these different ways that you can find the brand and interact with it. You want that to be really consistent. I think that's the other thing we're starting to see. All those touch points should be delighting and not disappointing the guest.
For sure. I love the alliteration too. Let's keep it going. So I want to hear about creativity. How do you keep your team inspired? What inspires you? How are you continually coming up with fresh ideas?
Yes. Well, lately we've been really into AI. I have to say,
Yes,
we used to do outings to Meow Wolf and all the different museums. I would think travel is a huge component.
of course.
I was just in Cleveland, Ohio, of all places, taking my dad back to his old stomping grounds and where he grew up, and we got to go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was super cool. It was like all these interactive, experiential moments within the museum of just bringing to life music culture. In addition, they had, installations that were LTO installations that were just for the quarter. And it was like women of music and all the different amazing women who've made their way over the last few decades. There was one about 1984, which is all the best music from 1984. It was like Michael Jackson's Jacket and Madonna. And I think that's the other thing we're starting to see is harkening back to simpler times. Even for this next gen, you've seen Y2K fashion and how excited, everybody is to the vinyl resurgence to discover some of these older music that was before. They want to know what that's all about, even though they weren't there for it.
Yes.
So I thought that was really neat. So sometimes we'll do some of the immersion stuff and see flash forward, flash back, what's happening in other alternative realms or industries. At the same time, AI has been wild. So things like ideogram, where you can create imagery on your own. We're starting to dream up whole restaurant concepts or menu items you can do. It's wild. I also love, just for fun, things like Suno, where you can create your own AI songs. So that's been a huge source of inspiration. At the same time, we're not going to outsource it. It's helping boost the
Of
creativity, not
course.
replace it.
Yes. No, I really appreciate that. I'm super jealous. I've heard amazing things even about the food scene in Cleveland, which,
Yeah,
I think Cleveland gets a little bit of a bad rap, although I loved Drew Carey and, when they started the show and like Cleveland rocks. I mean, like, yeah, I'm all about that. Let's go check it out. I do think that there's a huge resurgence for some of the non-coastal cities that, had not gotten a lot of attention and now are helping to boost their downtowns by offering creative, experiences like this. So I'm a little
Well
jealous. I'm
said.
gonna have to
In
go.
fact, they're even more motivated than the coasts. Yeah,
Yes.
Cleveland has a whole arts district. I've spent time lately in Detroit, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I'm like, where am I? It's super cool.
Yeah.
All these, like the second city, Chicago scenarios where they have even more maybe motivation to make it inspiring all around.
Well, here you are traveling
Hey,
now.
tell me how
Yep.
you reclaim creativity, maintain creativity.
I read incessantly, although I've been slacking a little bit because I have claimed a fascination with sourdough.
Ooh,
My 12-year-old loves to bake, and we've, anywhere we travel to, he's learned to make croissants in Paris, and he's made like other pastries and marble cakes in Marseille, France, and all of this. But for whatever reason, he wasn't into sourdough, and I said, you know what? He's not into it. I'm going to get into it. So I did it, and it's taken me about 3 months, and I finally got a good like rhythm. Although I think I make too much, and so I then go give it to my neighbors. But as you
yeah.
can see, I love to read, and so I'm continually filling my brain with books on leadership or how to steal like an artist. Or I love the podcast by Chris Do. I think he's on a mission. I think it was initially I want to teach a million creatives how to make $1 million, and I think now he's pushed that limit because I think he's already reached that because
That's
he's
awesome.
great. So yeah, I take it from all facets. I grew up, I think, being somewhat parented by movies as well. So we watched a lot of movies. There was a great movie that I just watched called The Electric State, which is very much aligned with what you were saying earlier about, encouraging the kids maybe to go back to flip phones without having all of this. I turn off every single notification because we are just so bombarded with so much stuff. And
Mm.
it's so distracting and challenging to be able to have the time and the space to be creative and to just sometimes I just don't even put the music on in my car and I just drive in silence. Sometimes
Mm.
I'll crack the windows, sometimes I'll leave the air conditioning on, but I think it's important to have those downtimes because you need the inputs to just settle and then figure out how the puzzle pieces come together.
I think that's brilliant. Yeah, it's important to have a little time to step away as well. I got into a few years ago piano playing again, and I hadn't played the piano since I was really little. It's like it comes back to you. It was like riding a bike. I could do it. Not very well. It's kind of painful and slow, but I like Disney and show tunes. But
Well, that
things like that, just another creative outlet. I love also just going outside and going running. Yeah, it gives your brain a chance to just process all that you've taken in.
Absolutely. Well, and also with the kids too. I'm sure, your kids are into Disney. So if you're popping on something on the piano that all of a sudden those neurons are firing and they're going, okay, where have I heard that tune? Oh, mom, you're playing such and such.
I hope so. I hope so. I'm requiring everybody to take a couple lessons, and then you can decide if you want to stick with it or switch to something else. So that's my hope. I want to have a little band, like each one of the five chooses a little instrument. We can jam.
I love that. So my kids, I told them, hey, we're not super religious, but on Sundays we're going to music school. And so
That's great.
my youngest, who's 12, has been playing drums for 7 years, and my oldest, who's 15, has been doing bass guitar. He switched from cello, but guitar's good. And so like we force them to be up and perform and be part of bands. And I've got a restaurant client who has a Cuban restaurant, and he's got a little stage. And I said, so Luis, my kids, they're musicians. Do you think that maybe you guys can like pre-plan a song or two? And of course, I sent him the video of the kids. I didn't want him to think I was that mom who my kids really sucked and, that I'm just
We'll
trying to
try a
promote.
video.
And he goes, actually, they're really good. He goes, yeah, okay, have them practice X, Y, and Z, and then we'll jump up on stage. And it was just so beautiful. They got up there with like no, you know, angst, no nothing because they had practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. For them to go up on stage is not a big deal. Whereas when I was at their age,
Oh my goodness,
heck no, I would
wouldn't
never.
go well.
Yeah. Yes. So
That's
I
wonderful.
encourage you. That's a great way to get them kind of working together for a shared
Well, we'll see. My band idea is a little bit half baked. I have been telling them they could just walk down to Pearl Street. We have a lot of buskers on Pearl Street here in Boulder, and that might be a nice little way to practice in front of a crowd. I love that you would set that up for them, though, so that it's not so scary. I think if we start that now, they'll be ahead of the game.
so with that, being a mom, I also believe that you've been to A couple, lots of countries. So share with us as you're traveling and getting those inputs, obviously beyond Cleveland and other markets through travel, through parenting. How has that informed the work that you do?
I like to say, and this might apply to everything, parenting is as hard as you want to make it. If you think it's going to be really hard, it will be. If you think it's going to be a lot of fun, it will be. And I think we started that from the beginning. I think when I was pregnant with my first, had a lot of, speaking of angst, to see how this was going to go. Could I keep doing my job to my very best ability? Could I continue to travel the world? And my husband, who's amazing and very adventurous, we committed to continuing to do that, and we'll just take them with us. So even when they were tiny, I think our first trip was to Croatia with a little baby, and it was great. They're so portable. Baby passports are hilarious. So we've just kept that going.
I
And
agree.
the other thing I think for Americans, we don't get a lot of time off. So we ended up using paternity leave for some of that vacation time, which was awesome. But yeah, you just put them in a little pouch. I think for one maternity leave was Spain, another one to Colombia. Fifth maternity leave was in Cuba. Um, and I think as long as they're kind of on that, flexible schedule and things, I think that set us up for a nice, adventurous sort of lifestyle where we can do what we do from anywhere. And I think the kids are hopefully benefiting from that, just seeing things differently. And I think the flexibility, the patience, the seeing other parts of the world and recognizing that not everybody is exactly the same and that we're very, very lucky. And so I think that has all been just life-changing for me, but also really important for us as a family to go different places and think about how we can help places as well. So that's something that I think we're really looking forward to when we have our kids, get gifts and we're like, what do you want to save? What do you want to like donate and give away? And then what do you want to spend? So we have them divvy that up. And it's been really fun. One of our littles who loves pandas, she got to see the pandas in China. She puts all of her giveaway money into the panda fund to save the pandas. So it's kind of nice to think about. Hopefully this is kind of setting that foundation for them to think differently and to also want to contribute later on.
For sure. No, I love that. We do the same, right? Our kids don't get gifts; they get
No.
adventures and experiences. I was a little embarrassed the other day. My son was in the car with a friend and their younger sister, and he said, "Yeah, I've been to 19 countries, and I'm 12 years old." And the little girl, who's the younger sister of his friend, she goes, "Oh, mom, I've been to New York and to Florida and to Sacramento." And she goes, "Oh no, those are cities in states in the United States." He's been
Yeah.
international. So I don't think it was an embarrassing moment. I just, try to remind him to be humble, right? Like you're very lucky to have this opportunity, but also hopefully it opens your eyes that you can then come back and teach others.
Totally. I love that. It will be interesting to think too about just this global mindset. I think we're more than ever global citizens thinking about other places in the world. I think we see that more than ever.
Oh, I love this. We've got so many comments and conversations to have afterwards. So
I know, I
if
know.
you could whisper one truth to every brand leader, what would you start them off with?
Find your North Star. I think that applies professionally and personally. Find what guides you, what lights you up. I think that's been a big thing, especially that we see in leadership. What is the thing that's going to be your motivation, your inspiration? Maybe what do you even want to be known for later on? And I think the same thing for brands is how are you going to find that, force, that unifying force that would take you to the next level? We talk a lot about moving your business forward when you do work on the brand, just because it clarifies everything so well and it helps your brand shine or stand out. So that's what I would usually say is start there, which implies a few different things, right? Is to figure out who is that consumer or who are you serving and why? How are you going about that in a way that's really sustainable and exciting? What about you? What do you tell your favorite collaborators?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely on it. I mean, there's so many clients that we work with, and I think they often forget who they started it for because maybe they've gotten down the road and they've got, they went from 1 to 5 to 14 and now they're just like they're so in it that they forget. And so to take them out and there was one I kidnapped. I said, "What are you doing this weekend?" She goes, "Nothing." I said, "Well, I've got a conference that I'm speaking at and I'd really love for you to be there. It's all about women in food and beverage. You want to jump in the car with us?" And she's like, Yes, let's go. And literally that morning, I picked her up, jumped in the car with me. I drove 5 hours to Charleston, white knuckle, because it was raining outside. And I had her and three other clients in the car. And it was just really rewarding to
So
hear them
special.
have a conversation because the one that I grabbed last minute, she had 14 restaurants. One of the other clients that I had in the car with me had one. And so while the conference was amazing and I enjoyed, connecting with everybody there, to hear the depth of their conversation and the 5 hours there and the 5 hours back was just, I mean, it was a huge life lesson, but so many great nuggets of wisdom. And the two of them are now best friends because they were
Mm.
stuck in the car for 10 hours. So, it's really good to help incorporate also the youth because the youth, like, gives us new ideas, but also reminds us kind of why we started.
I love that. That's so sweet, and I love that they're best friends.
Yes, it's
I've
really
been
sweet.
pondering this as more of a starry-eyed extension, but last summer, I hosted the top 10 marketing leaders, all ladies, all female leaders of the marketing team at Fat Brands. Yes, it was amazing, and it was more of a mind, body, business retreat, especially the working moms among us, they don't even break for lunch. So we had, yoga and vision boards and dinner. And the next day we did talking about the vision boards, but also what everybody appreciated about each other on this team. They're all across the country, all maybe working on different brands, different entities. And it was a really nice combination. We did challenge breakouts where we had a set number of challenges, things that we might, teams might be struggling with. Groups who didn't work on that day to day would take on the challenge and come up with just such creative solutions that nobody had thought about before. We also did astrology, which was fascinating, just with your birthday, location, even the time, and everything about it was exactly right. Some of these women who've known each other for 10 years work together. They're like, oh my goodness, that's you. So it was really a nice alignment too, personally. What am I good at? Where should I, flex or things, look at things differently? And again, it was just like this nourishing, personal, professional exercise. That night we found karaoke, and every morning we'd get up early and go hiking. So it was just a really nice, again, mind, body, business. How do you find your North Star in life or personally and take a little bit of time to reflect on that? But then how do you apply it to your brands and your business so that you can think like that portfolio manager, move the business forward because you are realigned?
Well,
So
and
now I'm
again,
wondering,
take
should
the
I be doing that like quarterly? Should I do
that sounds amazing. Yeah, sign me up. Let's go.
that? That was awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Liz. I feel like that was a masterclass in branding with soul. Liz reminded us today that a brand isn't just a logo, it's a living story. It's a spark that helps people feel something when they walk into your shop, sip your coffee, scroll your page, and hear your name. Whether you're a founder, developer, creative, today's episode was a call to reconnect with your brand's deeper purpose and build something that burns bright. You can learn more about Liz and her team's transformational work at StarryEyedStrategy.com. Thank you,
Thank you,
Liz.
Edie. Thank you so much. I'm Liz Seelye, and you're listening to Hustle and Heart.